Yes, sir. Here I am, live in the Prop Swap Studios, 10:30. So you know what that means. It's time for the Football Fix. Wednesday, still a lot to cover. Previewing Week 4 as the Eagles will be traveling out west to take on San Francisco. Still recapping that tie. Updates regarding the Titans and Vikings. Injuries and plenty more. So we have to bring in the man, John McMullen. John, how are you?
Doing well. Impressed by the Prop Swap Studios. I figure I'd make a mistake on that prop swap. I got to get that down.
Yeah, come on, man. You're not giving yourself enough credit.
I just did it. I'm pretty proud of myself.
I'm proud of you, too. Should we end there?
Yeah, go out on a high note like George Costanza.
Right, exactly. So where do we start? That's kind of what I've been saying to the start of all of our conversations, because it's just like a one big when talking about the Philadelphia Eagles right now.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps getting worse and worse. I think if you saw the injury report today, I think you got to start there. It's like a laundry list. It's like a book. You're basically looking at who's practicing versus who's not. It's easier to say who is practicing. And a lot of it is this weird kind of COVID environment. You mentioned the Titans and Vikings, but you know, when you go to practice, and even as a media member, you have to fill out this sort of questionnaire. So it basically, people who are in offices, they have to do that now. It's probably a similar thing. You know, have you had a temperature? Have you been in contact with anyone who's tested positive? All that kind of stuff. And if you click off a yes, if you're honest, you can't go in the facility. So, I mean, you saw it all throughout training camp, and you had these illnesses, and people are saying, is that COVID? Is that not? And no, it's just somebody checking yes. And I joked, hey, easy to get a day off now. So I'm not saying guys are doing it, but the Eagles had a couple illnesses today and a whole lot of injuries. And, you know, this is a team that probably needs to prepare. And by the way, maintenance stays on top of it. Kind of amazing that the NFL is turning into the NBA and load management circles. It happens in every city, but it seems to happen a little bit more in Philadelphia. And I don't know. It's not working out so far, I'll say that.
So how, for the listeners, how are teams and the NFL testing everyone? So is it the NFL medical officials administering the test to every team in the NFL? And my point with that question is, can certain teams not potentially report that a player has tested positive? Is there a way to do that?
No, it's all independent. And, I had to go through it for every day of training camp. You get tested every single day. And they've continued that through into the season. So players get tested every day except for game day. And that way, you remember, if you go back to training camp, you had those false positives all throughout the league. That was one of the independent labs in New Jersey that had, I think it was 77 false positives. And that's where the daily testing helps a little bit, because you can at least find those anomalies pretty quickly. So, it's gone very well until the Titans outbreak, as you mentioned. And even that, I've been told that most of those who tested positive remain asymptomatic. So we've talked about that. And when you've seen it with the Eagles, whether it was even Doug Peterson and the guys who did test positive, like Lane Johnson, had very, very minor symptoms, and that part of it's all good. But it's I think I said it yesterday on the show that the hysteria is worse than the positive test, unfortunately. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon because of where we are in society that has nothing to do with football.
On Sunday, who do we know for sure, John, that will not play? Key names, because there's a lot of them, and who may not play, but we don't know for sure yet.
Well, obviously, you know the serious injuries and the fact that Jalen Reagor moved to IR, so obviously he's going to miss at least 3 games moving forward, probably more than that. They're probably looking at him after the bye week in November. I can't imagine. Obviously, it's early in the week, and Doug's not going to rule anybody out. I can't imagine Deshaun Jackson's going to play with a hamstring injury. I can't see it. And on the other end of the spectrum, Lane Johnson continues to deal with this ankle injury. It was actually surgery, and he talked to us today. Said basically it swells up during the week and he calms it down before the game, and he goes out there and plays as he tries to continue to fight through this thing. And Fletcher Cox is not going to practice. He's not going to practice. He didn't practice today. He's probably not going to practice tomorrow, and he's going to be back on Friday, and he's going to play in the game. Those two guys, and I've said it before, I mean, they're going to play. If you allow them to make the decision, they're going to play. And that's exactly what has happened, and that will continue to happen. Other players, I mean, lesser players, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I think if you go back to the Monday press conference, Doug he couldn't hold in his frustration with J.J. because we talked a lot that game in Cincinnati. That was such a big game for him to finally prove something that maybe he could salvage what is going in a negative direction very, very quickly. And then he goes out there for pregame warm-ups and starts complaining about a lower body injury. He had the compression sleeve on his leg today. Seems like a hamstring. Eagles are beyond frustrated with that guy. I don't think he's going to be relevant the rest of the season. I'm making that prediction right now. So that's just some of the major guys. And by the way, the entire offensive line, Jason Peters was sick today, so he didn't practice. Jason Kelsey was a maintenance day. Lane was very, very limited. At one point at the beginning of practice, Ryan, they lined up with Prince Tega Wanago at left tackle, who's on the practice squad. He's not even on the roster. Nate Herbig at left guard. Luke Juriga at center. He's another practice squad guy. The right guard was Matt Pryor, and the right tackle was Jordan Mailata. That was what they were lining up with on the offensive line.
Oh, man. Is that for the JV game at 6 p.m. before the varsity at 8:20? I don't understand.
I think, yeah, exactly, until they cancel that for COVID-related reasons. But, I mean, yeah, that's sort of the preparation. It's such a weird season. And, you know, you mentioned, again, the Titans and Vikings. The Vikings are going to play on Sunday, and they might not even practice before the game. It's absurd, this whole thing.
Yeah, it really is. The Eagles now have moved to 7-point underdogs. It was 6 to 6.5 for the early lines this week. 46 on the point total. Eagles plus 245 on the money line. San Francisco minus 285. I guess if we're trying to be positive, the 49ers are dealing with a lot of injuries too. But Greg Kittle, from what I saw, John, is expected to go. And what are the updates on the other side of the ball?
Yeah, George Kittle. But, that's the best tight end in football. And obviously, you look at the Eagles and their weakness. And, it's linebacker, obviously, first and foremost defensively. And, I don't want to see Nate Gary chasing that guy around. But, from a positive standpoint, it's unlikely Jimmy Garoppolo will play. I don't think he's going to play. So it's going to be Nick Mullins again, the backup quarterback. And a lot of people say he's just as good anyway. But I don't think I don't think either are really elite level signal callers, obviously. So I talked to Rodney McLeod today, talked to Darius Slay today as well, and kind of asked them, how do you prep when you're talking about two different quarterbacks? And they didn't seem concerned at all. They said basically the same thing. This team is much more concerned with the San Francisco running game. And that's, what the Eagles tried to do with their offense by bringing in Rich Scangarello. They wanted to bring in some of those concepts that the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan use. But they're banged up at running back as well. I mean, Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, Jerick McKinnon, they got a lot of them, but everybody's hurt. So, yeah, if you want to be positive, they might even be more hurt than the Eagles are.
So what are let's just get to your midweek, not exact prediction, but midweek thoughts. And I was wrong. A couple minutes ago I said it opened around 6. The spread opened at 3. The Eagles were 3-point dogs when the lines were first released, and now it's all the way to 7. So just to correct that mistake. How do you feel about this game, John? Is this a game where you're like, okay, now their backs are really against the wall. The 49ers are depleted themselves. The Eagles should be able to go in there and find a way to win, or not so much?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I have no beat on this team. I think I've said that before. It's very difficult. You mentioned that line that opened. First of all, I said, well, that's a backup quarterback line. I mean, how are the 49ers not favored by more in this game? And it's gone that direction. I think a combination of the realization the Eagles are playing so poorly. I think they have a chance if Carson Wentz plays like Carson Wentz, which he hasn't done this season. If he continues to play at the level he has in the first 3 games, I think they have no chance. So I don't know. How do you turn that switch on? And in a lot of ways, I don't even expect the big plays because, I talked about the offensive line, and that'll calm itself down as the week continues because Kelsey's going to play, Lane's going to play, and, we'll see about Jason Peterson where he is. But so that will calm itself down. The receivers, though, I don't know if Alshon Jeffrey's going to be ready. I think it's more likely he'll be ready for week 5, and he'll be back there. So if he doesn't play, I don't think Deshaun's playing. I don't think they care if JJ's playing. So you're talking about Greg Ward and John Hightower as your top receivers. So I don't know if there's going to be any explosion from a fireworks standpoint of great offense, but if Carson just takes care of the stinking football, that 49ers team is so banged up, we haven't even got to the defense. There's no Nick Bosa anymore, who was the best player on that team and the key to them going to the Super Bowl. If you're going to pick out one guy, that was the guy who made such a difference. He's gone with a torn ACL. Solomon Thomas is gone. Dee Ford's probably not going to play. I mean, they're a mess. So if he doesn't turn it over, I think they got a chance to win the game.
So, all right, Carson Wentz. And I was having a conversation about Carson Wentz earlier with a good friend of mine who, unfortunately, is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And we were talking about Carson Wentz, and he's like, I love Carson. He's elite. When Big Ben...
He is not elite.
I know. And he says when Big Ben wins the Super Bowl this year for the Steelers and he rides off into the sunset in a year or two, the Eagles will trade Wentz to Pittsburgh and will welcome him with open arms. And I just give that story because my question is, he's saying, well, look at the injuries, look at the receivers, all the points that you were making as well. Well, what is Carson Wentz's ceiling this Sunday? Like, how good can Carson be given not just his individual struggles, but everything around him?
I think you saw the ceiling last year in the final month because that's how they're going to have to play. When Greg Ward and Boston Scott and Josh Perkins were key parts of the offense, but he He trusted those players, understood their limitations, and really became more of a, for a lack of a better term, a point guard more than trying to press everything, more than trying to score 50 points, just distribute and live to play another down and do all that stuff. So maybe it's kind of boring, but it's winning football. I think that's the ceiling until you get some of the playmakers back and playing at hopefully a high level. And then you could start talking about other stuff. But it's baby steps, and you got to go back to what they were able to do in the final month of the regular season last year. Maybe with a little bit better because you do have Miles Sanders, and he's playing well. But, Dallas Goedert, we haven't even talked about. I mean, he's on injured reserve now. So you only have Zach Ertz at tight end. And, you can't play 12 personnel a ton with Richard Rodgers. If you do, that's losing football. So you say, okay, well, Doug wants to play 11 personnel anyway, so this is an excuse for him to get back. Well, you don't have 3 competent receivers. It is a mess. So if you want to make excuses for Carson Wentz, it's pretty easy to do. But, I mean, he's never played this poorly, and he's had these types of issues in the past. And when you use that term elite, I mean, this guy's no longer, you could bend over backwards, and I know Eagles fans have done it, and say, well, 2017 and point to that year. Look, he's not even in the conversation with Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. He's not in that conversation. Forget about that.
What happened? Just simply what happened?
Well, I think there's a number of things. I do think he's struggling with his confidence. I do think, and I'm going to, write about this in Philly Boys tomorrow. It'll be up about noon, and the fact that, I don't think that Jalen Hurts pick helped. I'll tell you that. His confidence, his psyche. It was such a strange pick. And, I was talking to a league executive, former league executive, and he called it a laboratory pick. In other words, you might say, and Howie Roseman tried to spin it like, well, that's the most important position in sports, which it is. And we want to have good players, and we think this guy has a chance. That's how it was all spun. Well, you're not looking at the human side of it. You're not looking at the mental side of it, what it does to the psyche of the starting quarterback. Because that's not how you do business in this league. You can't all of a sudden say, oh, okay, we've done it this way. And by we, I'm saying not only the Eagles, but the rest of the NFL for the past 50 years. And you're going to wake up one day and say, oh, no. We're going to have another guy who's younger, and you're only 27, and we're going to put him on the roster. I think that affects his psyche. It's not a video game. It's not a joystick. He's a human being. If you were in that position and they drafted a kid like that, what would you think? Just put yourself in that position.
I wouldn't be happy, but here's the thing, and I'm not saying you're using this as a legitimate excuse, and maybe you're using it as a factor. Fine, but I'll say, look at Aaron Rodgers and what that team has done in the draft. They haven't helped him at all. They've traded away.
And he was super PO'd.
Good.
I'm fine with that. He was really upset, ripping the organization, ripping the team. Aaron Rodgers did an interview, I think it was with Adam Lefkoe. If it wasn't, I apologize to him, but I think it was with him. And he said, he destroyed them. He was like, we were 13-3 last year, basically said. We're a game away from the Super Bowl. I need a receiver. Jefferson started to drop. He mentioned Rager. He mentioned Brandon Ayuk. He wanted a receiver. And he was extremely pissed off that the Green Bay Packers picked Jordan Love. And by the way, The Packers are probably the team that the COVID-19 rules and regulations help them more than anybody else. I think I've mentioned this on your show, if not on other shows, because of Aaron Rodgers. And he is so good with those hard counts and drawing people off sides. He does it 2 or 3 times, and he saves it for big spots at home in Green Bay. Now he gets to do it on the road. And he did it in New Orleans the other day, and this team is set up to do so many things that there's no fans in the stands. That's how good Aaron Rodgers is. But imagine if you didn't have the hubris and the stupidity to take a quarterback who's not going to play, and you got him a receiver, how much better you would be.
I'm with you.
So the Packers are idiots for doing that.
They are idiots, and I loved that rant you just went on. I didn't want to cut you off, and just to go back, my point in this is look at Aaron Rodgers, and his team hasn't helped him at all, and he has every right to be pissed off. Look at Brett Favre. When Aaron Rodgers was drafted in 2005, and Brett Favre in 2007 led that team to a 13-3 record, threw 28 touchdowns, and Aaron Rodgers was sitting right behind him, waiting to step in and replace him. So my point is, the elite, they have a strong mental capacity as well. So I don't.
Well, I agree. I agree with that part. But I will say this, and this is where I will defend the Packers after destroying them. Aaron's 35 years old. When they drafted Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre was in his upper 30s. Carson Wentz is 27.
Yeah.
Nobody has done this in 50 years, Ryan. Nobody has had a so-called top-tier quarterback and selected a quarterback in the draft in the first 2 rounds at 27. It's not done. It is never done. It's never been done. Again, while I think the Packers are stupid, Aaron is old, and he's closer to the end than he is to be, even though quarterbacks play too much later because you're not allowed to hit them these days. It at least makes sense from that standpoint. If you're the Green Bay Packers, trust me, if Aaron Rodgers was 27 years old, they would not be taking a quarterback in the first 2 rounds in the draft. It's just not done. That's not how you do business. And Howie Roseman, he made a mistake. He made a mistake by doing that, and it might blow up this whole organization. That's where we're headed, unless, and I agree with you, Carson Wentz has got to be mentally tough enough to take this and get past it. If he's not, the whole thing is blown up, and Howie made a mistake, and he shouldn't have done it.
He's made a lot of mistakes. That's just obviously one of the biggest, but there's a ton of mistakes that you can point to, and he's done a lot of great things. But while we're on this, is there a chance Howie gets fired? Like, what's the ripple effect? No?
No. Carson's going before Howie. Doug's going before Howie. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie loves Howie Roseman, trusts Howie Roseman, and he understood what a devastating mistake he made when he sided with Chip Kelly. He's not going to do it again. This is the guy he trusts the most with his organization. He is entrenched far more so than Doug Peterson or Carson Wentz.
Do you trust him?
They'll both. Do I trust Howie Roseman?
Yeah.
Not as a personnel guy. I think he's tremendous when it comes to the salary cap and those types of manipulations. I think he's very good with trades and value and understanding how to leverage those types of issues. So if he was to trade, say, Carson Wentz, I think he would get a significant package back. I think the one issue with Howie is personnel, and it's tough because you had Joe Douglas here for a while. You have Andy Waddle now. Obviously, he's not the only one involved in these types of and nobody is. So if you talk about any general manager in this league, they have a staff, and that staff does the work and provides the information, but you take the hits if a draft choice is wrong. And we've seen, whether it's Sidney Jones, a second-round pick, Rasul Douglas, a third-round pick, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, like I said, this team, the head coach scoffed at him on Monday. These are premium picks you're swinging and missing on. And, I thought about this today, Ryan. This team is desperate for Deshaun Jackson to get healthy. 32 years old, going to be 33. He might be whatever. Alshon Jeffrey's 30 years old. They're begging for him to come back. Jason Peters, they're trying to squeeze another year out of him at 38 years old. I mean, the reason they have to rely on these players is because they've missed so much in the drafts over the past couple of years, and that's the biggest problem here.
The biggest among many. And John McMullen joins me every night at 10:30 to try and talk through them. I mean, we could do a whole hour, John, just you and I talking Carson Wentz or talking Howie Roseman. So one day maybe we'll get that opportunity because there's just so much to dive into, man. But I appreciate you joining me. As always, great insight. You watching this Lakers game? It's a blowout.
Yeah, well, I'm more of a baseball playoffs, but the NBA Finals is. I think I told you before. I'm all Jimmy Butlered up, man. I want him to win that thing.
Yeah, it would be nice. I'm rooting for him as well, but they're down big right now against the Lakers.
LeBron. I always say he's the most well-rounded player of all time. You can argue who's best. Everybody's got a different definition, but that's the most well-rounded basketball player that ever lived.
LeBron's the GOAT. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen. His show, Extending the Play, every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., PhillyVoice.com, SportsIllustrated.com. Scoop B is next.
Hurt at work? Go right now to InjuredWorkers.com. When you're in